The piercing sound of an ambulance siren echoed through the hallways of St. James Hospital, like an alarm bell shattering the late afternoon calm. Nurses and doctors turned their heads toward the incoming stretcher, pushed by paramedics with an urgency that left little room for doubt. Lying on it was Lydia Cromwell, a 62-year-old white woman, her face pale and ghostly, almost blending into the cold gray walls of the hospital. Her eyes were closed, and her breathing came in short, fragile bursts that seemed to hang in the air, ready to be swept away by the winter chill. Lydia had always been known as a formidable woman, perhaps a product of her years of experience and status in Larston's upper social circles. She was known for her stern demeanor and her often unapproachable air. When she was alert, her face held a cold, determined expression. But now, she was nothing more than a frail figure on a stretcher, an elderly woman clinging to life under the fluorescent lights of the emergency room. Just then, the doors to the emergency room swung open, and Dr. Marcus Levine entered. He exuded a calm confidence, the assuredness of someone who had worked in the medical field for many years. Marcus was a tall, middle-aged black man with sharp features, deep-set eyes, and a quiet authority. Calm was second nature to him, honed through years of handling life and death situations. He wore a crisp white coat, and his gloved hands were poised for action as his keen eyes took in the scene with a single sweeping glance. Claire, one of St. James's most experienced nurses, hurried over to Marcus. Her face was tense, and there was a slight tremor in her voice as she spoke. "Dr. Levine, the patient is Lydia Cromwell, 62, she said quietly, her voice steady, but unable to mask her worry. She was brought in unconscious, severe respiratory failure, with serious cardiac complications." Marcus nodded slightly, his gaze fixed on Lydia's pallid face, as if already mapping out the steps he would take. "Get her into the operating room immediately," he said, his voice low but resolute, leaving no room for hesitation. The team moved swiftly, pushing the stretcher toward the operating room. Claire and the other nurses scrambled to prepare the necessary instruments and check the monitors. The atmosphere in the room was tense, thick with urgency as everyone readied for the surgery. Marcus approached the operating table, standing beside Lydia, his focus unwavering even as the nurses confirmed her vital signs on the monitors and prepped the machines. For a brief moment, Marcus reminded himself that this wasn't just a challenging surgery, but a battle for life, a battle he couldn't afford to lose. For him, medicine was more than a job. It was a calling, a mission he'd chosen long ago, despite knowing the obstacles he would face. He had encountered many prejudiced gazes, countless whispered doubts, but he knew none of that could deter him. In this room, he was a doctor, and his sole purpose was to bring the woman lying on the table back from the brink. Claire, standing nearby, seemed hesitant, but finally broke the silence. "Dr. Levine, I know your experience is remarkable, but this case—" "It's a tough one," she murmured, a slight quiver in her tone. Marcus gave her a gentle smile, his expression calm and unwavering. "We do this every day, Claire. Challenges are our work," he said, his voice steady yet carrying a sense of unbreakable resolve. "And we're here to face them, not to back down." He looked around, signaling everyone to be ready. All eyes were on Marcus, the doctor they trusted to handle any situation without flinching. As Marcus's hands began to move, his gestures were precise and controlled, a choreography of practiced skill and confidence. He worked under the bright lights of the operating room, his focus solely on Lydia, a woman who likely would never have granted him a second glance outside of this setting. Yet now, he was the only one standing between her and death. The other nurses in the operating room watched with quiet admiration, not daring to interrupt or even breathe too loudly. Marcus wasn't just a doctor at this moment. He was a warrior, fighting against every passing second to bring his patient back to life. The white light in the operating room was stark and unyielding, casting everything around in sharp focus, as if time itself had paused in this space. The steady beeping of the heart monitor echoed through the room, creating a tense rhythm that everyone understood marked the fragile line between life and death. Dr. Marcus Levine stood by the operating table, his eyes fixed on the surgical area of Lydia Cromwell's body. His hands moved with precise perfection, each incision, each movement executed with care, as if every drop of blood, every strand of muscle was part of a complex system where no error was allowed. Claire, the head nurse, stood close, ready to pass him instruments on command. "Scalpel," Marcus said, his voice low and steady, his eyes never leaving the incision. Claire quickly handed him the scalpel, her movements practiced and smooth, part of a routine they'd rehearsed countless times. "Dr. Levine, the patient's heart rate has dropped slightly," another nurse reported, her voice tinged with worry. Marcus gave a slight nod, his focus unwavering. "Monitor it closely. We'll adjust the sedatives if necessary," he replied, his tone calm, reassuring everyone in the room. Time drifted slowly. The sounds of the machines and the steady breathing of the surgical team filled the space, the only noises breaking the otherwise heavy silence. As Marcus continued, Claire glanced over at him, quietly admiring his unshakable composure. "Have you ever felt nervous, Dr. Levine?" Claire asked, her voice soft, carrying a hint of curiosity. Marcus looked up briefly, his eyes gentle but serious. "Of course," he replied, "but the important thing is not to let it take control." He immediately returned to his work. "Lydia Cromwell is here because of us, and we're going to do everything we can for her." Claire nodded, inspired by his determination. "You always stay so professional, Doctor. I don't think anyone could handle this like you do." Marcus gave a small smile, but his hands continued working. "We're all here for the same purpose, Claire. Life." The surgery stretched on for hours, and Marcus could feel the beads of sweat forming on his forehead. The pressure was mounting, but he refused to let himself pause for even a second. To him, Lydia was more than a patient now. She was a challenge, a reminder that his role was not only to treat illness, but to face every difficulty placed in his path. After a long while, Claire spoke softly. "Her heart rate is stabilizing, Doctor." Marcus exhaled quietly, feeling a slight release of tension, though he stayed focused. "We're almost there. Check all the vitals one more time. I want to ensure nothing is amiss before closing up." Claire checked the monitors and nodded in confirmation. "All readings are stable. She's responding well." Marcus turned to her, his eyes tired but filled with satisfaction. "Good. We're finished. Thank you, everyone, for your teamwork." The nurses in the room also sighed with relief, their faces relaxing after the tense hours. Claire gave Marcus a gentle smile, her voice filled with admiration. "Dr. Levine, you did an amazing job. Not everyone can keep their calm the way you did." Marcus removed his gloves, glancing around the operating room, as if committing the faces of everyone who fought alongside him to memory. "This isn't just my accomplishment. It's ours. We saved her life, and that's what matters most." He looked down at Lydia Cromwell, now stable on the table, her heartbeat steady on the monitor. Though he knew she might never appreciate or acknowledge his efforts, Marcus still felt a deep sense of fulfillment. Saving a life was what mattered most to him. Lydia Cromwell awoke in a white, sterile hospital room, the endless ceiling above her in sharp focus, the dim lighting softly enveloping her. Her body felt heavy, and every breath came with a dull ache. She slowly opened and closed her eyes, adjusting to the faint light and the unfamiliar surroundings. For a brief moment, Lydia recalled the sudden pain and chaos before she blacked out. She glanced around the room as if searching for something familiar, but all she saw was cold, empty space. Her gaze settled on a figure standing near her bed, a tall man in a white lab coat, exuding quiet confidence. His skin was dark. For a brief moment, Lydia recalled the sudden pain and chaos before she blacked out. She glanced around the room as if searching for something familiar, but all she saw was cold, empty space. Her gaze settled on a figure standing near her bed, a tall man in a white lab coat, exuding quiet confidence. His skin was dark. Dr. Marcus Levine took a step closer, clipboard in hand, his demeanor calm, professional, and with a gentle smile on his face. "Good morning, Mrs. Cromwell. How are you feeling?" Lydia frowned, her voice weak, but laced with disdain. "Who are you?" Marcus remained composed. "I'm Dr. Marcus Levine, the surgeon who performed your operation. It was a complex surgery, but everything went well. You're recovering nicely." Lydia stared at him, her eyes flashing with irritation. You're the one who operated on me?" Her voice grew sharper, almost incredulous. She looked him up and down with barely hidden disdain. "I can't believe it. You think you can be a doctor?" Marcus tried to ignore her contemptuous gaze, responding calmly, "Yes, Mrs. Cromwell. I performed your surgery, and I'll be overseeing your recovery." Lydia shook her head, her face a mix of frustration and disgust. "No, I can't accept this. I want to see a real doctor." She spat the words, emphasizing real, making no attempt to hide her prejudice. Her eyes were cold, as if he had no right to be in the room, much less care for her. Marcus paused for a few seconds, his gaze steady despite her attitude. "Mrs. Cromwell, I understand that you may feel unsettled after surgery, but I assure you, your operation was successful, and you are in safe hands." "Safe?" Lydia interrupted, her tone dripping with disdain. "You think I'll trust someone like you?" She closed her eyes briefly, as if trying to regain her composure, then continued, "Are you the only one here?" "I want to speak to the hospital director," Marcus answered, his voice calm. "I'll arrange for you to speak with the director, if that's what you wish. But for now, I suggest you rest. Your health is our top priority." Lydia turned away, her face twisted with irritation. "Don't tell me how to take care of myself. I don't need your pity. You think you can reassure me?" Marcus gave a slight nod, keeping his gaze steady. He understood the emotions she was expressing, but did not let them shake his resolve. "I'm not here to pity you, Mrs. Cromwell. I'm here to help you recover. That's my responsibility." Lydia raised an eyebrow, her expression growing colder. "Responsibility? You think your responsibility is to save my life? How could you possibly understand what I need?" Throughout their conversation, the tension thickened, hanging heavily in the air, as though the entire room was frozen under her disdainful gaze. Marcus stood quietly, looking at Lydia with unyielding composure. He knew that no amount of explanation would change her thoughts at this moment. "Mrs. Cromwell," Marcus said gently, attempting to ease the tension, "I'll notify the hospital director and other doctors if you would like additional opinions. But I hope you can feel assured that you're in good hands, and everyone here wants you to have a swift recovery." Lydia fell silent, refusing to look at Marcus again, her expression hardened with unspoken anger. After a few moments, she said coldly, "Leave. I don't want to see you anymore." Marcus nodded, his tone still professional. "I'll have a nurse come in to assist you. If you have any issues, I'll be here to help." He turned and slowly exited, closing the door behind him, leaving Lydia alone in the quiet room. Marcus stood outside, taking a deep breath, steadying himself against the weight of the recent exchange. Marcus Levine entered Lydia Cromwell's hospital room once more, carrying her health chart and monitoring report. Soft light streamed through the window, illuminating the calm and quiet space, though the air was thick with tension. He moved with his usual calmness, his expression unwavering, fully aware that his presence would likely provoke more irritation from Mrs. Cromwell. As soon as Lydia saw him, her face twisted into a frown, her displeasure clear. Still lying in bed, she turned her head towards the window, unwilling to meet his gaze, and making her disdain all the more obvious. "Good morning, Mrs. Cromwell," Marcus greeted her, his tone warm and respectful. "How are you feeling today?" Lydia remained silent for a moment, drawing out the pause to convey her disregard for him. Finally, she turned her head toward him, her gaze icy. "I don't understand why you're here. I already requested another doctor." Marcus nodded slightly, understanding that her reaction was unavoidable. "I understand, Mrs. Cromwell. However, I am still your attending physician until the hospital decides otherwise. And I wanted to let you know that you're recovering well after the surgery." Lydia interrupted him, her tone sharp with sarcasm. "Recovering? And you think you're qualified to ensure that? You think I'll feel reassured hearing that from someone like you?" Marcus maintained his composure unaffected by her words. "Mrs. Cromwell, I'm here to ensure that your health is monitored and cared for to the highest standard. Your vital signs are showing positive progress, and if there are no complications, you may be discharged soon." Lydia turned away sharply, her voice hardening. "I don't care about what you have to say. I've already asked to speak with the hospital director, and I want that request fulfilled immediately. I don't want to put up with your presence any longer." Marcus's response was gentle, yet firm. "I have forwarded your request to the director, and she will see you as soon as she is available. However, for now, I will continue to oversee your care to ensure you experience no discomfort." Lydia took a deep breath, visibly trying to compose herself, though her anger remained. "Do you know who I am? My family contributes a significant amount to this hospital. I am not just any patient you can treat like this." Marcus nodded, his expression unchanged. "I am well aware of your influence, Mrs. Cromwell. I hold all my patients in the highest regard. You are a valued patient, and I will make sure you receive the best possible care." Lydia scoffed. "Respect? Do you think I need your respect? What I need is a competent doctor. Not someone like you." He understood precisely what she meant, but Marcus maintained his calm. "Mrs. Cromwell, I assure you that I am a highly qualified doctor, and I am committed to using all my abilities to safeguard your health." Lydia stared at Marcus for a moment before averting her gaze again, as if looking at him was enough to irritate her. She spoke with a cold tone, "Then prove it by leaving this room. I don't want to see you." Marcus took a deep breath, but his voice remained calm and professional. "Mrs. Cromwell, I'll give you some privacy, but I'll return to check on your condition, as required to ensure your recovery." Lydia said nothing, only continued to stare out the window, dismissing his words. The heavy silence lingered as Marcus stood quietly, making sure Lydia understood his intentions. Finally, he left the room, closing the door softly behind him. A few hours later, Marcus returned to check on Lydia's progress and her vital signs. Upon entering, he saw Lydia still lying in bed, her cold gaze fixed on the ceiling, showing no sign of interest in his presence. Marcus approached the bed, carefully examining the medical equipment and her readings. After a few minutes, he turned to her with a gentle smile. "Your vitals are stable, Mrs. Cromwell. Everything indicates that your recovery is progressing well." Lydia merely scoffed, her expression unchanged. "Do you think I care about that?" Marcus responded, his tone still polite and soft. "Regardless, I wanted you to know that your health is progressing positively. That's my duty." Lydia shook her head, sighing as if she were enduring his presence. "Your duty is to take care of me. But that doesn't mean I have to endure your presence. Please arrange for another doctor." Marcus nodded. "I have forwarded your request, and the director will arrange something if possible. For now, though, I am still your primary physician. If you experience any issues, please let me know." Lydia glared at him, her gaze turning cold and sharp. "Don't you understand? I don't want to speak with you or have you here. If this hospital values its reputation, they'll find another doctor." Marcus replied calmly, still holding a patient demeanor. "Mrs. Cromwell, I understand you have your feelings about this situation, but I am here to make sure you receive the best care, whether or not you wish for it." The conversation eventually fell into silence again, and once more Marcus left the room, leaving Lydia in the tense quiet of the hospital room. The following days at St. James Hospital felt like a smoldering storm for Marcus Levine and the medical team. Tension between Lydia Cromwell and her caregivers escalated, making the atmosphere around her hospital room feel increasingly stifling. That morning, as usual, Marcus entered Lydia's room. He greeted her with a slight smile, doing his best to maintain a professional and friendly demeanor. "Good morning, Mrs. Cromwell. I'm here to check on your recovery process. How are you feeling today?" Lydia glanced at him with disdain filling her gaze. She let out a heavy sigh. "Why are you here? I've made it clear that I don't want to see you." Marcus stayed calm, holding her medical chart and reviewing her vitals. "I just want to ensure that your recovery is progressing smoothly. Your incision is healing well, and your vital signs are stable." Lydia scoffed, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "Healing well? Is that what you call this?" She placed her hand on her surgical site, anger flashing in her eyes. "I've never felt this much pain and discomfort in my life." Marcus nodded, trying to keep a sympathetic tone in his voice. "I understand that recovery can cause some discomfort, especially in the early stages. However, these symptoms are normal and should gradually subside over time." But Lydia seemed unimpressed with his explanation. She sniffed dismissively, a challenging gleam in her eyes. "Do you think I'm easily deceived? It's clear that I'm not receiving the proper care. It seems like you're trying to hide something." Marcus sighed softly. "Mrs. Cromwell, I assure you that every measure we take meets the highest medical standards. My goal is to ensure you recover as comfortably as possible." Lydia narrowed her eyes, her voice laced with a threat. "Do you think I believe you? Let me tell you, if my condition doesn't improve, I won't hesitate to contact my lawyer. I have the right to demand better care." Marcus raised his eyebrows slightly, keeping his tone gentle. "I fully understand your concerns and respect your rights. If you have any specific requests, I'm more than willing to accommodate them as best I can." Lydia glared at him, her lips pressed tightly together. "There's no need to say any more. I'll wait and see if my condition truly improves. But remember, I'm not someone to be treated lightly without consequences." The following morning, Marcus returned to Lydia's room to check her vitals and the condition of her surgical site. Standing beside her bed, he worked to maintain a professional and calm demeanor. "Good morning, Mrs. Cromwell. How are you feeling today? Any signs of improvement?" Lydia gave him an icy stare. "Improvement? What do you mean?" "I still feel uncomfortable. I'm still not sleeping well, and I'm still dealing with pain." Marcus nodded, patiently listening. "I understand. The recovery process can be uncomfortable. If necessary, I could recommend a pain reliever to help you feel more comfortable." Lydia sneered, her eyes filled with scorn. "Pain reliever? You think I need medication. What I need is a competent doctor, not someone unsuitable like you." Marcus was taken aback for a moment, but quickly regained his composure. "Mrs. Cromwell, I assure you that we are all highly qualified and strictly adhere to medical protocols. Your safety and comfort are our top priorities." Lydia frowned, her voice growing colder. "If this is the best care you can offer, then I seriously doubt this hospital's reputation. You know, my family has very deep connections with the hospital's leadership. If I'm not satisfied, I won't hesitate to do whatever it takes to demand a change." Marcus kept his calm demeanor, his voice unwavering. "Mrs. Cromwell, I understand that you have the right to demand the best care possible. I only want to help you feel comfortable and recover as quickly as possible." Lydia shook her head slightly, her voice filled with menace. "I don't want your excuses or reassurances. What I need is a clear result. And if I don't see that, I won't hesitate to sue this hospital, sue you, and demand compensation for the inconvenience I've had to endure." The conversation once again drifted into tense silence. Marcus took a deep breath, maintaining his patience and dedication to his work, knowing that Lydia's threats were growing by the day. Each day, she seemed to find a new reason to accuse him, and Marcus understood that the challenges he faced went beyond simply providing treatment. In the quiet office of St. James Hospital's director, Dr. Ann Williams, sat behind her desk, listening intently as Marcus Levine recounted the ongoing issues with patient Lydia Cromwell. Sunlight streamed through the window, adding a dignified glow to the room, and Dr. Williams, a woman in her 50s with an air of wisdom and authority, focused on every word. Sitting across from her, Marcus could feel the tension of recent days weighing on him. He took a deep breath, trying to relay the situation clearly and accurately. "Dr. Williams, the situation with Mrs. Cromwell has become more complex. Despite my efforts to provide her with the best care, she continues to complain and is now threatening to sue both me and the hospital. She claims that we have not provided proper treatment, even though her recovery is progressing entirely as expected." Dr. Williams placed her hands on the desk, her sharp gaze focused on Marcus through her glasses. She was an experienced leader, having handled many difficult situations before. "Marcus, I understand this is a challenging situation for you. Lydia Cromwell is a patient with influence, and her dissatisfaction with her treatment could become a serious issue for the hospital's reputation. But the most important question is, are you certain that you've made no mistakes in her care?" Marcus nodded firmly. "Dr. Williams, I can assure you that every step of her treatment has been conducted according to protocol. Her health indicators are stable, and her surgical wound is healing well. I've explained to her the symptoms and discomfort that can accompany recovery, but it seems she's unwilling to understand." Dr. Williams was silent for a moment, her gaze thoughtful. "Do you think her dissatisfaction might stem from the fact that you're her primary doctor? As I understand, Mrs. Cromwell is somewhat conservative and expressed clear biases from the start." Marcus sighed, feeling a twinge of frustration. "Yes, from the moment she found out I was her doctor, she was dissatisfied. I believe she's looking for any reason to fault my care, even though her condition is entirely normal." Dr. Williams crossed her arms, leaning back in her chair as she carefully considered Marcus's words. "This is a complicated situation. We know that her accusations lack medical basis. But from a management perspective, we also have to consider the potential damage to the hospital's reputation, especially given her family's social standing and influence." Dr. Williams let out a quiet sigh, then continued, "As you know, Marcus, St. James has always prided itself on its reputation for providing high-quality care. For patients like Mrs. Cromwell, we don't just provide medical treatment. We also have to manage their expectations and demands. We must be extremely cautious in this case. Marcus nodded, his expression a mix of worry and determination. I completely understand, Dr. Williams. I've been doing my best to maintain a professional and compassionate approach. But dealing with Mrs. Cromwell's constant pressure isn't easy. She's placing strain not only on me, but on the entire medical team, and I'm concerned that this could lower everyone's morale. Dr. Williams slowly nodded, showing understanding. Marcus, I understand how you feel. No one should have to endure constant imposition and threats when they're simply trying to do their job. But I want you to stay calm. If Mrs. Cromwell intends to proceed with a lawsuit, we'll need a clear strategy. Do you think we should consult a legal expert? Marcus thought for a moment before responding. That might be a good idea. I don't want to put the hospital at risk legally. However, I'm confident that everything I've done is within the guidelines. Having legal advice on hand could give us peace of mind and prepare us in case she pursues legal action. Dr. Williams offered a reassuring smile, placing a hand on Marcus's shoulder. Her tone softened. Marcus, you are a dedicated and highly skilled doctor. I don't want you to feel pressured by a situation like this. I'll support you in every way. If necessary, I'll join the discussions with Mrs. Cromwell and her family to address the issue directly. Feeling reassured, Marcus managed a small smile. Thank you, Dr. Williams. I know you always support your team. I just hope we can resolve this without affecting the hospital's reputation. Dr. Williams sipped her tea, her gaze steady on Marcus. What if we prepare a detailed report of Mrs. Cromwell's entire treatment process, from her admission to the present, to serve as evidence that we adhered to every medical protocol? Marcus nodded, his eyes brightening at the suggestion. That's an excellent idea. Having concrete, detailed documentation will help demonstrate the level of care and professionalism we've shown in treating her. I'll work with the team to compile all the records, including test results, diagnoses, and notes from every follow-up examination. Dr. Williams smiled encouragingly. Very good, Marcus. I'll entrust you and the nurses with this task. Make sure all records are complete and clear. This isn't just about protecting you, it's about protecting the hospital. We need to be prepared for any eventuality. Marcus felt a weight lift slightly with her supportive words. I'll do my best to complete this task. Whatever happens, I want to prove that our hospital prioritizes patient care above all. Dr. Williams stood up, giving Marcus a warm smile and a reassuring pat on the shoulder. I believe in you, Marcus. We'll get through this together. Mrs. Cromwell may be placing pressure on us, but no one can deny the dedication of our team. St. James Hospital has always prided itself on the quality of its care and the commitment of doctors like you. Marcus left Dr. Williams's office feeling lighter and more determined. He understood that facing a difficult, demanding patient like Lydia Cromwell wasn't just part of being a doctor, it was also a test of his dedication and professional ethics. That morning, the usually quiet atmosphere of St. James Hospital felt heavier than ever. Shocking news had spread quickly through the hallways and waiting areas. Lydia Cromwell, the patient infamous for her incessant complaints, had officially filed a lawsuit. The lawsuit not only targeted Dr. Marcus Levine, but implicated the entire hospital. In her legal complaint, Mrs. Cromwell accused Marcus of lacking medical expertise, insinuating that racial discrimination was the reason she felt she was receiving subpar treatment and inadequate care. Marcus received the news from Dr. Williams, the hospital's director, early in the morning, just before he was due to begin his rounds. He sat silently in her office, his expression thoughtful as he listened to Dr. Williams read aloud the details of the lawsuit. Marcus, Dr. Williams spoke in a calm but concerned tone. Mrs. Cromwell has officially filed a complaint with the court. Her lawyer has submitted documents claiming you lack the necessary expertise, and she is suggesting that racial discrimination is the reason she received poor treatment. Marcus maintained an unusual calm, though a subtle tension lay behind his eyes. I followed every medical protocol precisely, Dr. Williams. I am confident in my expertise and professional ethics. These accusations are entirely groundless. Dr. Williams nodded, showing her trust in Marcus. I understand, Marcus, and I have no doubts about your abilities. But I want you to know that this lawsuit could seriously impact the hospital's reputation. The Cromwell family is influential, and if they're truly set on bringing this matter to court, we may be in for a challenging battle. Marcus took a deep breath, his gaze steady. Dr. Williams, I won't give up. I'm willing to take responsibility if there were any errors, but I know I've done everything I could to provide the best care for her. I cannot allow my reputation to be tarnished by baseless accusations. Dr. Williams observed him in silence for a moment, then offered a slight smile. I know. I have complete faith in you, Marcus. However, I want you to understand that this situation doesn't only affect you personally, but also the entire hospital. We need to be well prepared. The next day, as Marcus entered the hospital, he noticed a subtle shift in the atmosphere. His colleagues, who usually greeted him warmly, seemed slightly reserved, with discreet expressions of concern in their eyes. Even though no one said it aloud, Marcus understood that everyone had heard about the lawsuit. The nurses and doctors knew that a lawsuit like this could harm the hospital's reputation, especially with sensitive issues such as racial discrimination involved. Claire, a close and supportive nurse, found him in the hallway before he entered a patient's room. Her eyes reflected both concern and a touch of anger. Dr. Levine, Claire said softly, but with evident worry, I heard about the lawsuit. Mrs. Cromwell is really determined to take things this far? Marcus gave her a slight smile, trying to keep his tone calm to reassure her. Yes, Claire, but we know the truth. I know what I've done, and I have complete confidence in my professionalism. We mustn't let these baseless accusations shake us. Claire clasped her hands tightly, her expression showing determination. All of us trust you, Dr. Levine. Everyone knows you're a dedicated and professional doctor. Mrs. Cromwell's accusations won't change our trust in you. Marcus nodded, feeling heartened by the support of his colleagues. Thank you, Claire. I truly appreciate your support and that of the team. Any of us could face situations like this, and the important thing is to stand firm. In his office, Marcus sat before a stack of legal documents that the hospital's legal team had prepared. Each page contained statements from Mrs. Cromwell's attorney, asserting that Marcus had not provided adequate medical care and even suggesting that he had discriminated against her. Even though he knew that everything in the lawsuit was fabricated, Marcus couldn't ignore the pressure mounting around him. That afternoon, Dr. Williams stopped by Marcus's office, her expression resolute. Marcus, I just spoke with our legal team. They have prepared the necessary legal defenses to protect your rights and the hospital's. We will present all medical records and evidence regarding Mrs. Cromwell's treatment to demonstrate that you followed every protocol professionally and appropriately. Marcus listened, his eyes filled with determination and loyalty to his work. Thank you, Dr. Williams. I will work with the team to ensure that all necessary evidence is prepared. I want to protect not only my reputation, but also the reputation of this hospital. This isn't just a personal issue. It's a fight to defend what's right. Dr. Williams gave a slight, encouraging smile, her eyes warm but resolute. I trust you, Marcus. You are an excellent doctor, and I know you won't back down in the face of this challenge. We won't let anyone harm St. James' reputation. In the following weeks, the preparation for the lawsuit became more intense. The hospital's legal team worked tirelessly gathering all medical records, notes, and documentation related to Lydia Cromwell's treatment. Marcus spent hours with the team, explaining each step of the treatment process in detail and providing documentation to prove that every decision he made was based on his expertise and executed according to protocol. One evening, after everyone had left the hospital, Marcus remained in his office, meticulously reviewing each file with unwavering focus. The light from his office illuminated the room in the quiet of the night. Marcus was alone, determined and resolute. Suddenly, Claire entered, holding a cup of hot coffee. "Dr. Levine, I thought you might need a little energy," she said with a soft smile, placing the coffee on his desk. Marcus looked up and smiled appreciatively. "Thank you, Claire. You're still here at this hour." Claire shrugged, her gaze admiring. "You're here, so I thought I'd stay and help. I know this lawsuit is costing you a lot of time and energy, but I want you to know you're not facing this alone. All of us trust you." Marcus nodded, deeply moved by her support. "Thank you, Claire. I can't express how grateful I am. The trust of everyone here is what motivates me to face this situation." Claire placed a reassuring hand on Marcus's shoulder, her eyes steady. "We all know the truth, Dr. Levine, and nothing can change that. You're someone we respect, and we'll be here to support you through whatever comes." As Claire left the room, Marcus felt a renewed sense of strength. He knew that the fight ahead wouldn't be easy, but the unwavering support of his colleagues, of those who understood his integrity, was the greatest assurance that he could continue defending the truth and his honor. The morning of the trial dawned with an air of tension and gravity in the courtroom. The room was crowded, filled with reporters, Marcus Levine's colleagues, and even former patients from St. James Hospital, people who had come to support the doctor they trusted. Marcus sat silently in the defendant's seat, his gaze focused, his expression resolute but calm. Next to him sat Dr. Williams, who had stood by his side from the beginning, always supporting and believing in Marcus's innocence. Leading the hospital's legal team was James Everett, a veteran lawyer known for his shrewd and precise approach. With extensive experience in medical-related cases, James understood that today would be a relentless legal battle. The trial began with a statement from the plaintiff's lawyer, Jane Miller, a sharp-looking woman with a commanding presence. She spoke in a firm voice, her gaze sweeping across the jury to capture their attention. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Mrs. Lydia Cromwell underwent a surgery that was supposed to restore her to full health. Instead, she endured prolonged discomfort, signs of what we believe to be negligence and lack of expertise on the part of Dr. Marcus Levine. More than that, we suggest that this substandard care may have stemmed from personal bias, a form of discrimination that has no place in the medical field." Marcus felt a surge of indignation, but he remained composed, reminding himself that the truth would prevail in the end. He glanced over at James, who remained perfectly calm. When it was James Everett's turn, he stepped in front of the jury with a confident demeanor, speaking in a steady but powerful voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are here today not only to defend Dr. Marcus Levine's honor, but also to uphold the truth. We will prove that every action taken by Dr. Levine adhered to the highest standards of medical care, and contrary to these baseless accusations, he provided dedicated and compassionate care to Mrs. Cromwell." James began by presenting evidence of Marcus's qualifications and expertise. He held up a folder and began reading in a formal tone. "Dr. Marcus Levine graduated with honors from a prestigious medical school, underwent rigorous training, and has achieved numerous accomplishments throughout his career. He is not only a skilled physician, but also a dedicated one, consistently prioritizing his patients' well-being. He paused, making direct eye contact with the jury before continuing. We will present evidence proving that Mrs. Cromwell's treatment proceeded entirely as expected, with no indication of negligence or discrimination. James then displayed detailed medical records regarding Lydia Cromwell's case. These documents were shown on a large screen, so the jury and everyone present in the courtroom could follow along. James pointed to charts and images, explaining each stage of the treatment clearly and meticulously. "This is a chart showing Mrs. Cromwell's recovery progress," James said, his voice steady, each word emphasized. "We can clearly see that all her vital signs were stable, with no complications post-surgery. In fact, her surgical incision healed quickly, and there were no signs of infection or irregularities." He continued, "Mrs. Cromwell may have felt discomfort after the surgery, but that is a natural part of the recovery process and does not reflect a lack of expertise or discrimination by Dr. Levine." The plaintiff's lawyer, Jane Miller, stood up to counter, emphasizing Lydia's prolonged discomfort as evidence of subpar treatment. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, a patient deserves not only a qualified doctor, but also one who ensures complete comfort and absolute safety during recovery. The extended discomfort Mrs. Cromwell experienced is simply unacceptable." James responded immediately, "Miss Miller, in the medical field, post-surgical discomfort is entirely normal. We have medical experts here to testify on this matter. Mrs. Cromwell recovered according to protocol, and there was absolutely no indication of medical error." Next came the testimonies from medical experts. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a renowned surgeon with over 20 years of experience, was invited as a witness. She stepped up to the witness stand, her expression firm and her voice steady. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Dr. Mitchell began, after reviewing all of Mrs. Cromwell's medical records, "I can confirm that Dr. Levine performed the surgery professionally and adhered to all medical procedures. The symptoms of discomfort that Mrs. Cromwell described are common during recovery, especially following a major surgery like this." Jane Miller stood to cross-examine Dr. Mitchell, attempting to imply that a patient could feel anxious when experiencing discomfort. However, Dr. Mitchell answered decisively, "In medicine, we cannot guarantee that a patient will feel no discomfort during recovery. That is a natural part of human physiology and not an indicator of medical negligence." James thanked Dr. Mitchell and continued by inviting several other doctors to testify. They all offered similar assessments, affirming that Dr. Marcus Levine had acted with diligence and professionalism. Each expert highlighted that there was nothing in the care provided to Lydia Cromwell that could be construed as substandard. During the court's recess, Marcus received words of encouragement from colleagues and familiar faces. Claire, the nurse who had worked closely with him for years, couldn't hide her relief. "Dr. Levine, I think everything is going in the right direction. I believe the jury can clearly see the truth." Marcus smiled, his gaze filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Claire. I wouldn't be able to get through this without everyone's support. You all are a tremendous source of strength for me." In the afternoon, James Everett continued the defense by inviting Marcus to testify on his own behalf. Marcus walked up to the witness stand, feeling the room's silence as everyone followed his every word. He took a deep breath, his voice calm but filled with conviction. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I stand here today not only to defend my honor, but also to make the truth clear. Throughout my career, I have considered it a sacred responsibility to care for my patients' health. In Mrs. Cromwell's case, I did everything within my power to ensure that her treatment was safe and thorough." He paused briefly, looking directly at the jury. I understand that discomfort can occur post-surgery, and that is something no one can completely avoid. But I am confident that the discomfort she experienced was a natural part of her recovery process, not due to any lack of expertise on my part." As he finished speaking, Marcus looked at the jury with a sincere and determined expression. He trusted that, with all the evidence and the truth laid bare, his reputation would be upheld. The trial continued until the end of the day, with each testimony and piece of evidence further strengthening the case for Marcus's dedication and expertise. When the judge adjourned the session, Marcus left the courtroom feeling a profound sense of relief. He knew that everyone, from the jury to those present, had witnessed the truth and understood his commitment to his work and his patience. The morning of the verdict was a crucial day at court, and the entire courtroom held its breath in solemn anticipation. After days of trial, with testimonies and evidence meticulously reviewed, the time everyone had been waiting for had finally arrived. The final decision from the court. Marcus sat in the defendant's seat, his gaze steady, although beneath his calm exterior lay a hint of tension. Despite his belief in justice, no one could predict the outcome in a courtroom. Next to him was James Everett, the seasoned lawyer who had stood by his side throughout the trial. James leaned toward Marcus, speaking in a low, reassuring voice. "You did incredibly well, Marcus. Regardless of the outcome, I want you to know that you fought bravely for your honor." Marcus nodded, feeling a surge of strength and determination from his lawyer and friend. "Thank you, James. I know not everyone is lucky enough to have a lawyer and a friend like you." The entire room fell silent as the judge entered, his expression serious, holding the carefully considered verdict. His voice rang out clearly, each word deliberate. "After reviewing all the evidence and testimonies, the court finds no evidence that Dr. Marcus Levine failed to meet medical standards or acted with any discrimination during Mrs. Lydia Cromwell's treatment. The accusations made by the plaintiff are unfounded." The declaration echoed through the courtroom like a gentle wave carrying immense power. Marcus closed his eyes for a brief moment, feeling a deep sense of relief wash over him. All the tension and fatigue from the past days seemed to melt away. When he opened his eyes, he saw smiles and shared joy all around him. The judge continued, "Therefore, the court dismisses Mrs. Lydia Cromwell's lawsuit, affirming that Dr. Marcus Levine adhered to medical standards with no misconduct in the course of treatment. This case will have no legal repercussions for St. James Hospital." As the judge's final words resounded through the room, applause broke out across the courtroom. Colleagues, friends, and loved ones of Marcus stood, applauding vigorously to show their support and admiration for him. Among them were Marcus's colleagues and former patients, some of whom were visibly moved to tears. Claire, Marcus's close nurse colleague, rushed over to him, unable to hold back tears of happiness. She embraced Marcus, her voice choked with emotion. "Dr. Levine, we always believed in you. Justice has finally prevailed. I knew you would never abandon your high principles." Marcus returned Claire's embrace, deeply touched by her loyalty and faith in him. "Thank you, Claire. Your support and everyone's support gave me the strength to stand firm through this ordeal." James stepped forward, a satisfied smile on his face, and extended his hand to Marcus. "Congratulations, Marcus. You faced this challenge with resilience and courage." Marcus shook James's hand firmly, his eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, James. Without your expertise and dedication, I couldn't have defended my honor. You're not just an incredible lawyer, but also a reliable friend." Outside the courtroom, a crowd of reporters had gathered to cover the lawsuit that had captivated public attention for weeks. As Marcus and his legal team exited, the supporters broke into applause, greeting him as a hero returning from a battle. Dr. N. Williams, the hospital director, approached, beaming with pride as she looked at Marcus. She patted his shoulder, her voice full of appreciation. "Marcus, you did it. You didn't just defend your own honor. You protected the integrity of STT. James Hospital, we are all immensely proud of you." Marcus nodded slightly, feeling the warmth and support from Dr. Williams. "Thank you, Dr. Williams. I was simply doing what I believed was right. I know I wouldn't have made it through without the support of you and everyone at the hospital." And smiled, STT. James Hospital is fortunate to have a doctor like you, Marcus. You represent the very best of what we hope for in healthcare. After the verdict, Marcus returned to STT. James Hospital, where his colleagues had prepared a small celebration to welcome him back. The atmosphere was filled with joy, and everyone greeted him with hugs and congratulations. Claire raised a glass, her smile radiant. "Here's to Dr. Levine, a doctor we all trust and respect. Thank you for never giving up and for standing firm to defend the truth and your dedication." Everyone lifted their glasses together, and the room filled with laughter and heartfelt cheers. A former patient of Marcus, someone he had treated in the past, approached him, clasping his hand with emotion in his voice. "Dr. Levine, you're an amazing doctor. Thank you for never giving up and for always making us feel safe." Marcus smiled warmly, his heart brimming with happiness and gratitude. "Thank you, everyone. This isn't just my victory. It's a victory for everyone who believes in justice and dedication in healthcare." The celebration continued, filled with warmth and unity, a moment for everyone to share in the relief and joy of overcoming challenges together. As night fell, Marcus felt as though a tremendous weight had been lifted. He knew he had overcome one of the most difficult trials of his career, defending not only his personal honor, but also the trust everyone had in his beloved profession. This event would forever be a memorable milestone in Marcus's life, affirming his dedication and professional ethics. He knew he would continue to serve his patients, with a steadfast commitment to his principles guiding him along the way. After the lawsuit ended, Marcus Levine seemingly returned to a normal life. He continued his work at STT, James Hospital, welcoming each patient with the same dedication and professionalism he was known for. However, in the wake of his legal victory, Marcus realized that the psychological scars left by the experience still lingered like an unhealed wound on his spirit. One late evening, after a long shift, Marcus sat alone in his office, gazing pensively out the window. The city lights sparkled against the night sky, mirroring his own contemplative mood, silent yet filled with weighty thoughts. He reflected on every doubtful look, every whispered word he'd faced during the trial. Even though he had been exonerated, he knew that deep inside, the battle had been more than just defending his honor. It had been about confronting the racial discrimination he had endured throughout his life. Suddenly, a soft knock at the door pulled Marcus from his thoughts. Claire, the faithful nurse and close friend who had stood by him through everything, stepped into the room with a gentle smile. "Dr. Levine, may I come in?" Claire asked, her eyes full of genuine concern. Marcus nodded, managing a small smile. "Of course, Claire. It's good to see you. Sit down. I was just taking a moment to reflect on everything." Claire took a seat opposite him, her gaze compassionate and warm. She could see the fatigue lingering in his eyes, though he tried to hide it. "I know the lawsuit is over, and you won, but it seems there's still something weighing on your mind, isn't there?" Marcus sighed, looking down at his hands clasped together. "Yes, Claire. Even though justice prevailed, I still feel something deeper. It's not just about the baseless accusations, it's the realization that, despite all my efforts and achievements, just because of my skin color, I'm still an easy target. That thought hurts more than anything. Claire paused, searching for the right words. Dr. Levine, you do know that all of us, every colleague and patient here, see you as an exceptional doctor, right? When we look at you, we see a dedicated, courageous, and honorable person. Your skin color has never diminished the respect we have for you. Marcus smiled softly, but a hint of sadness remained in his eyes. Thank you, Claire. You have no idea how much that means to me. But I can't deny that after this lawsuit, I realize that the road ahead won't be easy. My career may always be shadowed by challenges like this. Claire reached out and held his hand, her gaze filled with confidence and unwavering support. But Dr. Levine, if anyone can overcome these challenges, it's you. I believe that you're not just a great doctor. You're also an incredibly strong person. What you've gone through only makes us respect and trust you more. Marcus looked at Claire, and a glimmer of hope sparked in his eyes. Thank you, Claire. This lawsuit taught me that I can't just be a good doctor in the operating room. I need to be stronger to become a role model for others, to show that skin color doesn't define a person's worth. I want people to know that I will continue to stand up for justice and medical ethics. Claire smiled, squeezing his hand a bit tighter. You're not just our doctor. You're an inspiration. I'm certain that everyone who works with you learns so much, not only from your knowledge, but from your courage and resolve. In the days that followed, Marcus returned to work with a renewed sense of purpose. He began participating in community outreach programs, sharing his story with young people, especially those who also faced discrimination. Each time he spoke to a group, he recounted his journey, not just to raise awareness about prejudice, but to instill in them a belief that they too could overcome it. During one of his talks, Marcus met a group of medical students. A young man with eyes full of admiration approached him and asked, Dr. Levine, how do you keep your faith and motivation when facing challenges like these? Marcus smiled, his gaze sincere and warm. The key is to always hold on to your own values. No matter what others say or how difficult it gets, I remind myself that I'm here to help people. That has become my goal, my driving force. A young woman in the group then asked, aren't you afraid, knowing that you'll likely face similar barriers in the future? Marcus looked at her, his voice confident yet gentle. Honestly, yes, I am. But I've also learned that fear can't stop me from doing what I believe is right. This recent lawsuit was just one challenge. It taught me how to be stronger and how to use these experiences to become not only a better doctor, but a better person. His words weren't just meant to inspire the students, they served as a reminder to himself as well. Each time he shared his story, Marcus felt the emotional wounds from the trial slowly healing. He felt lighter, sensing his inner strength growing with every retelling. On another evening, after a long day at work, Marcus sat alone in his office again. He looked around the room, a space that had witnessed moments of tension, sadness, and determination. A strange sense of peace filled him. No matter what challenges lie ahead, I know I've found my reason to keep going, he whispered to himself. For everyone who believes in justice and for myself. Marcus understood that his journey wasn't just for him, but for everyone who would follow in his footsteps. Those who needed a role model of perseverance and courage, a doctor who not only healed bodies, but defended the dignity of all people. This journey would not be easy, but Marcus was ready to face it all. He had discovered his true purpose through the trials, and nothing would stop him from standing tall, with pride and unwavering belief in himself and the values he upheld.